Good evening and welcome to the April 26th, 2016 public session of the meeting of the Board of Education of the Princeton Public Schools. Mrs. Kennedy, will you please take the roll?
Andrea Spalla.
Here.
Patrick Sullivan.
Here.
Betsy Calvert-Baglio.
Here.
Molly Crine.
Here.
Justin Duran.
Here.
Tom Hagedorn.
Here.
Daphne Kendall.
Here.
Fern Sproul. Absent. Connie Witter.
Here.
Evelyn Spahn.
Here.
Maddie Norman.
Here.
Nick Pibble.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. May I have a motion for the adoption of the minutes from our meeting of March 15th, 2016? Justin, second. Molly, thank you. Any comments? Hearing none, all in favor? Abstentions?
Just Pat and Tom
Pat, Tom, and Evelyn abstain.
and Evelyn, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, tonight we basically have two meetings in one meeting. Our first meeting is our public hearing on the budget. I will hand the meeting over to the superintendent for his budget presentation.
Do you want to call the question first, or just wait to the presentation?
Let's do the presentation.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Spalla. Good evening, everyone. Particularly pleased to see some students in the audience tonight, and we have special guests. We have Ms. Spalla's parents are joining us this evening from Minnesota, so our board president will indeed be on her best behavior. Kurt, if you could pull up the presentation for the budget. One of the Perfect. One of the phrases that you will often hear me repeat, because I truly believe it, is that budgets they're not about numbers, they're about children. And they're about the vision we have for the future of our kids and how we choose to finance that future. We are very lucky to have a great district in the Princeton Public Schools. This budget is designed to make it even better and to do so in the most fiscally responsible way possible. Our budget priorities are listed here. So clearly maintaining a focus on learning, teaching, learning, and student achievement. But we also have been guided by our strategic plan, vision, and goals that are listed here: wellness, every child known, closing the achievement gap, innovation and experimentation, communication, and connection. The action plans for each of those goals are currently being finalized. So we don't have them in complete form, but we can anticipate the kinds of initiatives that they will be producing for our district, at least in the next year. We are also obviously providing for salary increases per our negotiated contracts. We want to maintain class size in the face of rising enrollments, and we will talk a little bit about the enrollments in this district as they appear to be rising over the next few years. We want to support state mandates, limit the tax impact in our community, and ensure fiscal sustainability for future years. We're planning a budget for 1 year, but we are thinking about the years ahead, and we want to make sure that what we do in this year is something that we can sustain as we move forward. In terms of the budget process, we are at the green square tonight, the end of the formal process with the board approval. But the process actually began well before this, actually back in December, when we asked principals and other department heads to bring to the table their hopes for new facilities, materials, staffing, what we could do to maintain their programs and what we could do to enhance them. The list of expenses that were brought forward was inevitably much greater than the list of revenues. And so Ms. Kennedy and others around the table tried to balance that as best as possible for the budget workshop on March 1st. We got some input from the board and the community at that point. We presented a tentative budget on March 15th. And in the interim, between March 15th and today, we had more concrete information come back to us. We had more feedback about how we could use the budget, adjust the numbers. And fortunately, this year, the adjustments since the tentative budget on March 15th were in the downward direction. And so with that good news, I can turn things over to our business administrator, Stephanie Kennedy, to talk to us about the revenues and expenses.
Thank you.
Wanna use this?
Let's see. Okay, arrow forward.
Right to move forward.
Okay. So the first slide is, I put this up in the front because this is what has changed since the March 15th budget that was presented. Additionally, the budget that is advertised in the newspaper reflected what was presented on March 15th. The process is the board approves it. It then goes to the county office of the Department of Education, who reviews and approves or makes changes, but it was approved as submitted. And then we must advertise what we had presented at that meeting. In the meanwhile, we're able to make changes, so this is actually a representation of what Steve and I would recommend to be the changes. And if the board would agree that these changes be made to the preliminary budget, I'll make them in the next day or so to all of the documentation, resubmit it to the county, and that would become the final budget after the county then approved it. There was two areas. Overall, we were able to reduce the budget by $596,000. And it came in two areas. One was in health benefits, and one was in property casualty liability insurance. The reason why the health benefits was able to be reduced by $388,000 from that line budget is when we started the budget process and I was given written recommendations on what to budget for health benefit renewal. For Aetna, our major medical carrier, I was given the numbers to budget 6 to 8% increase. I budgeted 6%. Then as the renewal, since we had that time since March 15th, a month later, we got final renewal numbers, and Aetna gave us basically a 0% increase. Our experience levels have been reasonable in the last 18 months, they look back. So that was why the renewal amount was pretty much at a 0%. So we were able then to cut that amount out of the budget. The prescription coverage in dental did have a slight increase. The dental had a slight increase. The prescription had a larger increase of about 17%. It's on a much smaller number than the major medical. But we are in a self-funded program, and we pay for our actual prescriptions purchased. So that's where that fell. In the area of insurance, property casualty liability, workers' compensation, we were in a 3-year consortium, a school-based consortium that will end on June 30th. So as a practice, every 3 years I will have the insurance brokers quote out the products for us. Again, this year that happened. When we got the renewal number from the company of the program we're already in, it was a $150,000 increase over our present budget. So that was in the budget. After I got the quotes in, not only could I remove the $150,000, I could remove an additional $50,000 with the new company. That new company will likely be another 3-year program that we'll be in. It's looking to be New Jersey Insurance Group, the New Jersey School Insurance Group, and JSIG. So all of that, we were able to deduct $596,000, which therefore reduced our tax levy. So that is the difference between what was presented on March 15th and what is being presented this evening. But then the impact will be demonstrated. These are all of the offices, departments, and school budgets. 15-16 present year budgeted and 16-17 17 proposed. And the difference is there. Some up, some down. These are just the schools and departments. And as you can see, actually, we are down $29,000. A large portion of that is coming out of student services, special education, and that is mainly driven by some tuition, special education tuition that's where that cut came from. So you can see that. This is the section on salaries. So you have contracted salaries. We have association agreements with PREA, PRESSA, and PAA, and then there's unaffiliated, which is a group of staff that is not in a union or works under a negotiated contract of a group. As you can see, overall, there's salary increases. Now there's, if you see on the side, there's a % increase. It is not what is a negotiated increase, it's how the net increase changed. So where you see unaffiliated or in PAA, there's, the groups are smaller, so a change one small change makes a large difference in % to go down. Overall, the salaries from one year to the next is 1.5%. So this is the category of the budget that we have really no control over. The first two lines, the insurance, we have control as to what I just discussed, negotiations and trying just to control the costs. But we have to have insurance. We have to have health benefit coverage. The health benefits, of course, is tied into the salary piece because that covers the staff that we have. So this is a non-discretionary categories. We also have waivers, which are health benefit waivers. So if you waive your health benefits, you'll get a stipend amount, money in lieu of. It's not really a stipend. Money in lieu of health benefit package. Also new to the budget this year, why there's an increase is because during negotiations of two unions, there was an agreement that with changes made to health benefits, that the board would share some of the savings with the units. And that is what that cost is. And it's just a category that is, it didn't really belong to health benefits. It didn't belong to salaries. It belonged in that category. Other district-wide, there's another slide that'll explain what other district-wide is. Charter school, I have S because sometimes other charter schools pop up that students may go to. This year we had one student that was slotted to go to another school district, but as we demonstrated to the state and the school, that student only had a Princeton address, but not a Princeton residence. So they'll be moved to the community from which they live. Utilities, and then the New Jersey School Development Authority debt payment. That is a, what was the word you used, Daphne? Remember we were talking about that in finance? That was a good term that you used. Anyway, well, that's a requirement we have to pay. I know, it'll come to me. But anyway, we have no control over that either. It's another payment. That actually is reduced. Garnishment, yes. We're garnished. Our state aid is garnished. Okay.
If I could ask about the shared savings, is that a 50-50 split? So if we're proposed 900,000, that's our share of the savings. What's the total savings?
No, the 900,000 is a combination. It just happened to be 50-50. Last year, we only had to budget for the waivers. This year, we have to budget for the waivers and the cost savings, which we're sharing.
Okay.
So it just happens to be kind of 50-50. Next year, it'll be 906 or 9010 or 9910 or 912, however it falls out. And there won't be a large increase because it'll be already embedded into the budget. Okay. So this is a more description of the non-discretionary items, health benefits, waivers, but the other is described down below. We have insurance, property casualty, utilities, pension payments, Social Security, leave of absence costs, and other smaller contract benefits. So the budget is really broken down in 3 and then 4 categories: salaries, non-discretionary, schools, departments, budgets, which gives us a total operating budget of $82,422,000. So as you can see, the non-discretionary and the salaries take up the bulk of our budget. The actual amount of money that is discretionary is only $13 million. Capital reserve is also in the general fund, but that is money that we already have in our, basically in a savings account for capital projects. And we are withdrawing from that fund $370,000. I have to show the $8,800, it's just part of the accounting to make it balance. But it's $370,000 for 2 capital projects, which we'll show in another slide. So the total operating budget is $82,801,000. Okay, so the capital reserve is $310,000 for roof replacement on the building that we sit in right now. We've had the roof leak from the 2nd floor down to the 1st floor, so it's time that we replace the roof. We have $60,000 slotted for the creation of a life skills room at an existing room in the Princeton High School for special education life skill training. And then the $8,800 is just a capital reserve interest income, and I just have to represent it. So, but the actual withdrawal is $370,000. This is just a visual of the expenses for 2016-17. Salaries being 57% of the budget for all salaries, and 13% for health benefits. So 70% of the budget is salary and benefits. Salaries alone, 46 million, almost 47 million, and that's how it's broke out. And then we get to revenues. Budgeted this year, 15-16, to propose for 16-17. There was a couple large areas that we had reduction in revenues from one year to the next. One is the first line, excess surplus, excess reserve. So at the end of June 30th, we have funds that will be available in the budget that are used, some of which we use to carry forward to the new year, which is a budgeted line item. And then after all the bills and everything else were paid, at the end of June of June 15, we only had $147,000 after our 2% that we're allowed to keep in our surplus to put into our upcoming budget. That's a required amount. Whatever that amount is, we have to put into the upcoming budget, whatever the amount over 2%. So in 15-16, to support that budget, we put $446,000, which was what was in excess of 2% at June of 2014. So June of 2015, we only had $147,000. That was a large chunk of revenue I didn't have to support the upcoming budget. Extraordinary aid is money that the 659 is part of the money that we received in June of 2015. The balance of it we budgeted in 15-16. Then we have our operating margin for the current year. So the present year, 15-16, we took $1,775,000. We project from 15-16, the year that we're finalizing, that we'll have a little bit less than that, $1,735,000. Capital reserve is a large difference. Our capital reserve amount is dwindling, and we have minimum ways to increase that amount. We used to be able to take our excess surplus and fund our capital reserve. June 30th of 15, there were no funds available to put towards capital reserve. Tax levy at $70 million is 2.82%. It's actually 2.815%. over our 15-16 budget. It's a total of $1,000,009 from the present year. And then there are just some other categories. Another category of where we lost revenue was actually in tuition. In two of the categories for tuitions. And then restricted revenues, they're just other miscellaneous revenues. They're basically flat from one year to the next. I don't know how to make this any more exciting than it is for everyone, but how many people glazed over?
Just a question on the capital reserve. So the budget keeps going up each year, but our capital reserve, I'm assuming, has been coming down steadily.
Correct.
So it was at 1.1 last year, it's dropping to 370. In prior years, I've been here only 2 years, but in prior years, was it higher than 1.1? Was it closer to 2 million?
Well, understand, this is a withdrawal from the
Got it.
capital
Okay.
reserve. So this is, we withdrew 1.1 million, but yes, we used to have more money so we could withdraw more money. You don't really see it on this side because I didn't demonstrate what we have in capital reserve. We could only withdraw 370,000 because we only have about $1 million left. I don't, in
Right.
capital reserve at all.
I just remember you explained this to me, the difference between the checking account and the savings account.
Yeah,
Right, so the
yes.
checking account is our operating budget, what we're spending on a daily basis to get us through a given year. The savings account is what we're using for capital reserve,
Right.
and that savings account has been
Is
dwindling.
shrinking, yes.
All right.
Yes, we used to have 3-4 million. Now we have 1 million.
Were we to do a referendum, would any of that money go to the capital reserve?
If we did a referendum, we would not budget money in a referendum to go into capital reserve. We would budget within the referendum funds
For
for
capital projects.
projects, for capital projects.
So where does the money for capital reserve come from?
Capital reserve, there's two ways to get money into capital reserve, actually three. One is you budget it during your budget process. So if we had, if we didn't have a full budget and we had some space within our budget, we could put 300, 400, 500,000, however much. We used to do that years and years ago. We used to have a line item to deposit into capital reserve. The other way is at June 30th, if there are funds available in the budget we're closing, every June you'll see a resolution that we have put on the agenda that says we can put up to X amount of dollars. It's usually $1 million is just what the resolution reads, into capital reserve. And that allows us, once the audit is complete and we know how much money we have over our 2%, whether we can put some into capital reserve. June of 15 was actually the first year that I was not able to put any money into capital reserve. Hopefully we'll be able to put something in this June.
How much did we draw down from capital reserve in last year's budget? Because we're looking at 370, which we're drawing it down this year.
1,000,001.
Oh, we did 1,000,001 we
Right.
took out last year?
Yes.
Oh, so this is much less.
Yes,
Okay.
1,000,001, and that was the majority of that was for 60% of the cost of the windows that are presently under contract now to be replaced. The other 40% came from the state and the SDA grant. And then we did, I can't remember what else we did, another smaller project.
And what's our current budget for the current amount in the capital reserve?
It's about $1 million. Okay. On to more exciting things. Okay, so this is just the rest of the budget line. So our revenue, if you remember, our expense amount was 82,801,000. Our revenue has to equal that, 82,801,000. So in reality, our revenue increase was 861 million from one year to the next. But remember, our capital reserve amount was a lot less this year. There's a visual of our revenues. Tax levy being 85%, state aid being 5%, and fund balance 3%. Capital reserve is 0% this year. Other revenues, there's, minimal ways for us to get other revenues, and you can see that's only 1%. Tuition, of course, is 6%, so that's actually more than our state aid. Thank you, Cranberry, mostly. Evelyn? So as everyone knows, we can increase our tax levy with straight out to up to 2%. After that, the way to increase above 2% is with waivers. This year, we had the opportunity for 2 years in a row to use a health benefit waiver of $264. That's the maximum we were able to use. That's in place to help offset the cost of a health benefit increase. And then we have, last year we got an enrollment waiver, which gave us some $1.7 million. We used 425,000. Thank you for remembering those numbers. 425,000 last year, leaving us a balance of 1.2 million. As I learned during the budget process, we actually have 3 years to use the banked cap waiver. This year is 16-17 is year 1. So we're going to use about 300,000 of that. That'll leave us about 950,000 for the next 2 years. So we can use all 950 or part of it next year, part of it the following year, 2 years out.
Just to clarify for the board, because this was new to me, we thought that the 3 years started with
This present year.
But the 425,000 that we took did not count as,
That was a base year.
that was a base
apparently.
year. So we essentially have, it's over 4 years that we could spread the 1.7.
Yeah. Which was good news. So in order to balance our budget, we are requesting that we use these 2 waivers. On the March 15th board approval, a budget that was presented and board approved, our health benefit waiver was over 500,000, but since we reduced our health benefit costs, the health benefit waiver that is available to us also reduced. And then our banked waiver, we were up over 600,000. We were taking about half of our banked waiver of 1.2. But since our costs are decreasing, we don't need so much of that. So we're only requesting 291,000 of our banked waiver, again, leaving 950,000 for the next 2 years to come. With those 2 adjustments over the tax levy, those 2 waivers, it would bring our tax levy increase to 2.82 or 2.815. Long-term debt is our debt or our bond payment return. We have 2 bond payments out. One was from the 2001 bonds from the referendum of 2001, and then a referendum from 2012. We have portions of that. So that's our annual payment for next year. The tax amount, actually our payment's higher, but that's the tax amount we have to collect. So our total tax levy to be collected is 2.975 for those 2 pieces. And then enrollment.
Let me say a few words. I got it, Kurt. Let me say a few words about enrollment. We have new microphones that we're all getting used to tonight. This is a projection based on the work of Dr. Grip, who was our demographer. He revised his projections in 2015, February of 2015. So you'll see our current year numbers, and if you look at the far right-hand side, you'll see that the peak year, according to the projections, would be 2017-18 for the district at 3,622. And then it starts to come back down again, which is important for us to keep in mind as we look over the longer term. But for next year, you'll see an interesting trend. So at the high school, the numbers are actually dropping from 1574 to 1549. We have a smaller 8th grade class coming up. The middle school stays about the same, and our real increase is at the elementary school level with a 52 student enrollment projected increase. it's interesting right now. We're looking very carefully at our kindergarten enrollment numbers. Community Park has 65 students already enrolled for 3 sections of kindergarten, and it's April. So it is possible, we're looking carefully to see if those numbers continue to rise. It is likely that they will. So the budget does include a position for a possible additional section of kindergarten at CP to account for the enrollment increase we're seeing. The other important factor to keep in mind is that Avalon Bay, with its 280 units, comes online supposedly this summer. And we're not yet sure what the impact is going to be within our community. Well, not all units will come online all at once, so it's going to be over the course of a few years probably, but we're not sure if that's going to be the numbers there will be spread evenly K through 12, or whether we're going to see a greater number, for example, at the high school. And certainly, since that's in the CP sending area right now, we have to keep a close eye on the numbers at that school. Go.
Okay, so this is a one-page takeaway. It gives everything in a snapshot. Our total operating budget, which is our day-to-day budget, is $82,801,000. Our total budget, which includes the debt service, which is the payment back of the bonds, and our federal and state grants, which are target expenses, is $90,861,000. Our percent increase in general fund is including all of that from one year to the next, is actually less than 1%. The increase in general fund tax levy, 2.82, total tax levy, 2.98. Our general fund tax increase is 1.9 million. Healthcare waiver, 264. Our enrollment waiver, 291. 264 is 0.39% additional to the tax levy, and the enrollment waiver, the banked cap, is 0.43% increase. The balance of the bank waiver is $950. The tax impact is that might be wrong. $179.70 increase on the average assessed home value of $810,000 for 2016.
And then that's less than you had projected at the March 15th meeting, correct?
That's correct. And I was saying 170 in our finance meeting, but it's 179, my mistake.
215, I think
215.
we had projected in the March meeting.
Yes. Okay, so this is just how the tax is collected, our tax is presented to calculate the tax levy increase.
Stephanie, I have a question about that. The mic here.
Excellent. So why did the debt service go up this year? Because that's why I was figuring that it's long-term debt, it would be constant every year. Is that not the case?
That is, no, that's not the case. The reason why it went up, well, the reason why it went down so much last year is, if you remember, we had put in $400 and some thousand to help offset tax levy on that item from our legal award that we won on a case, on capital case.
From
we
10
had
years ago.
from 10 years ago. So we have 5 years to pay that out. So I didn't want to take it in 3 years, because then it'll bump up in 3 years. So it bumped back up, although I'm still using some offset money on that. But because I took so much last year, that's why it's kind of a jump. So next year I have it set up to pay for to use the amount of money that we have for 3 more years after next year.
So our long-term debt service, the payments are constant, but what we've gotten is money back from lawsuits, and we're applying them in different amounts each year, and they're decreasing. So this amount's going up, will be a little bit larger next year.
Yes, partially.
Okay.
Yes, we're using money to offset the tax levy. So the revenue is increasing to pay. The debt amount that we owe is staying relatively the same. But the revenue that we have to pay for it is we have extra for the next few years. I'm using the same amount offset for the next years that we have, so that there isn't a jump. This would be the big jump, because we dropped from 5.6 to 5.1. That's because I had that big chunk. And we did that partially to help offset the increase that we had on the general levy part, if you remember. You might remember that. So I think it's about 230,000 that I've used. So next year I used, or the following year I'll use 230, then the following year I'll use 230, and pay it out over 5 years. After 5 years, I have to have expended it. But for me to put all the million in, then we'd have a big jump. So as was demonstrated here with the 450 we used. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So next year you'll see 5.4 and, maybe 5.5. It'll be similar. Okay. Educational impact.
All right. We outlined the tax impact. It's equally important that we spend some time on the educational impact of the budget. The budget currently supports all of the programs we have in place already, and attempts then to add people and programs to help us fulfill our mission. So we are looking to add a counselor at the high school. This is a position that the high school has asked for quite some time. Numbers are high at the high school, and I think we have one person who helps with college advising, so there has been a desire to have more support in that area, as well as just general support for our students. We also included, we typically get one psychology intern from Rutgers University who works with us full-time. They're highly qualified people, and we're grateful for their assistance throughout the year. They do an internship with us, and we this year are going to be, I think we paid $25,000 to Rutgers for the use of a psychology intern. We added an additional psychology intern in this year's budget. I already mentioned the rising enrollment at the elementary level, and particularly at Community Park Elementary School, so the budget does contain a reserve for a possible new section of kindergarten. We are looking, based again on our strategic plan, on the communications audit that we just conducted. The board knows and the public has heard that we are looking to launch a new website, a new email program. We're looking to do a lot with our web-based way of communicating, both sending out information and also receiving information. So we wanted to see if we could find a person who could help us with our web transition, someone who could monitor content, who could help teachers and administrators maintain the site with current information. And we're also looking to combine that position with communication, so someone who is helping to get good news out, who is helping to address the difficult situations we sometimes face in a district, school crises, and also keep us abreast of state and national initiatives so that we are out in front on those sorts of things. So it's a split position. It's sort of director of communications would be 50%, and oversight of web operations would be 50%. The position would report to the superintendent and to Mr. Goldstein, who's in charge of human resources. And would also involve teaching teachers and teaching administrators about web development. We are also looking to create a part-time position we're calling an innovations coach. So one of our goals this year is innovation and experimentation, one of the strategic planning goals. This is a person who would help teachers take the risks to individualize instruction, to try out problem-based learning, to think about, to look at design thinking, to look at new technology, both hardware and software, and how that can be integrated appropriately into lessons. So we're excited for the possibility of this position, which would be probably a 0.4 position. The budget adds $30,000 to our professional development funds in anticipation of some of the action team initiatives. So we know that we're going to be doing professional development in the area of differentiated instruction or personalized instruction. Problem-based learning has been a theme on a number of our action teams, have been looking to do that. And cultural responsiveness, training in how to be responsive to and supportive of different cultures, races, religions, and backgrounds. We have added, at the board's request, $20,000 for a student equity fund. This fund grew largely out of a need to support students who would go on the 8th grade trip to Washington, D.C. So there used to be, before I got here, I guess there was a fund that, an endowment that supported the students who could not afford to go on that 3-day trip to Washington, D.C., which is a really important extension connection to the curriculum at the 8th grade level where we're studying civics. So each year the endowment was funding about $20,000 to support those costs. When the endowment dried up, the PTO took on that responsibility, and the board felt that it was a responsibility because of its integral connection to the curriculum that we would take on. So we've established the fund to be able to address that need and perhaps other curricular-related needs as they come up, so we can ensure that all students have access to the established curriculum. We are excited to have in the budget the creation of a family literacy center that would be housed in this building. This is part of an overarching goal to increase early literacy education within our community and within our school district. So this program would offer 3 4-week sessions during the course of the year for families of preschoolers within our community, not necessarily those who are attending our school district, but anyone who would benefit from training in reading to children and developing literacy skills in literature, but also literacy in math, number sense, and mathematical literacy. So we're excited to be able to offer that not only to parents, but also to some of the older siblings, perhaps at the high school or the middle school, who are very often the caretakers for their younger brothers and sisters who haven't started school yet. We know that the achievement gap actually begins before kids reach us in kindergarten. We want to increase the verbal literacy and the mathematical understanding of students before they even start with us. We added $30,000 to our athletic budget to offset the costs of our booster club. So this has been an ongoing discussion. We know that our boosters provide a lot for our students. Ideally, the booster club should be providing the icing on the cake, and the district should be providing the cake. And I think, there's been some question that maybe the boosters have been providing a little bit of the cake as well. And so we're looking to get a handle on the division of expenses between the district and the booster club for things like uniforms, essential equipment, that kind of thing, transportation. And so we've added some money to the district's budget so that we can offset some of the contributions that boosters have traditionally made. And then we have $40,000 for the garden educators at the elementary school. So we were excited to be able to place that into the budget so that the garden educators were paid for by the district, and we can have perhaps more continuity with the curriculum across schools and ensure that those programs are sustained over time.
I'd like to just point out that all of this on this page is no additional dollars from the March 15th budget.
Exactly. So we were looking at, no additional dollars from the March 15th budget. We were looking at an increase of, $1.9 million in the operating budget overall. But most of that increase was based on salaries, health benefits, and insurance. So I think there was only like $54,000 of discretionary. So we were able to achieve some of these new positions and programs through rearranging or being more efficient in our use of people and staff. And everything we do, the budget certainly is in fulfillment of the mission of the Princeton Public Schools, which is stated here. So we are open for questions from the board.
wondering, the money that we saved from the healthcare costs and the insurance costs, was that reduced from the original amount the budget was gonna go up?
That's correct. The budget that was presented on March 15th, the budget that shows in the agenda is what was March 15th. But if you remember, you got in your packets and handed out this evening was a revision pages. So if the board agrees with that, that shows all the reduced numbers.
So the last page, we still have the reduction of the.
No.
I forgot, sorry. So the reduction of from the first page
That-
is still with those increases that were on that last page.
All the presentation that was presented is what we're recommending. So it shows all the changes, if that's what you're asking. Is what you're asking? It would have looked, the whole presentation would have looked a lot different if we presented it from the 15th.
Right. So the increases for the gardening and the, we're still having the cut from the budget.
Correct.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
I'll work on how to formulate questions.
Yes.
So I'd just like to thank you for that presentation. Mr. and Mrs. Spala must be absolutely thrilled that they chose budget night to come and visit and see their daughter. So thank you for all that. I'd like to say over this budget process, we've been working hard. I think many of us on the Finance Committee, maybe all of us on the Finance Committee, were concerned about the first cut of this budget with a 3.69% tax increase. We all thought that was high. We worry about obviously maintaining the great quality of our programs here in the district, but we have to be mindful of the burden on taxpayers too. And so happy to see all that you've done, Steve and Stephanie, to get all these great new initiatives, our current initiatives that are ongoing, and keep it at 2.81% versus a 2.69% increase last year, approximately $180 per household, which is very close to the tax increase of last year, which seems reasonable given the high quality of the education that we're provided. So, Stephanie, especially you, I want to thank you for all the hard work from getting there, and once again doing it in a way that's doesn't impact our taxpayers in an undue sense. So, thank you for all your work. Very, very good.
All right. So I would like to echo what Pat said about your hard work. Like I said in the meeting, you spend the taxpayer money like it's your own. And
In a good way.
What did I say? I was stingy, right?
yeah, well, she is stingy. But when Stephanie found out about the reduction in insurance costs, she was so excited, and you could tell that she really thinks of it as her own money. So we're very lucky, to have you watching over it. So first I want to thank you also. I know I have a lot of questions, and you've always been very diligent in getting back to me with all the information that I want, so I appreciate that. What I would like going forward is for the planning needs of the district to be more transparent to the board. I feel the board should be more involved in, or it should be more clear to the board how every dollar is spent. I'm not sure that I'm at that point yet, but I have faith in Stephanie, and so for this year, I'll just, I'm only on the board 3 months, I feel comfortable enough. That said, I am concerned about the burden on the taxpayer, and when I look at our town finance partner, and I read the budget, I notice our budget is 1.5 times larger than theirs. Their tax levy is approximately 50%, where ours is 85%. And so we were discussing this in the Finance Committee, and one of the things that I would encourage you to do, Stephanie, is perhaps look into creating a financial advisory committee like the township has, so that we can use the knowledge and expertise of some of our town citizens to help us, raise more money, find more grants, et cetera. And additionally, we spoke about additional sources of revenue from non-traditional sources that we will be exploring over the next year. So hopefully, you know, even though we did a great job this year, next year we might not have to reduce we might not have to increase taxes as much. So thank you very much. Job well done.
Okay. Okay, so somewhat unusually for our meetings, because this is a public hearing on the budget, this part of the meeting is a public hearing on the budget only, we now will open public comment to any members of the public who have questions or comments about the budget only. There will be other opportunities later on in the meeting for public comment on other agenda items, and then later, of course, for anything you like. But right now, the public comment is for budget items only. Mr. Montgomery?
Rod Montgomery from William Patterson Court, the taxpayer. This seems a little odd, but I'm going to ask whether you are spending enough on a certain particular category of activity. I'm talking about seed corn for possible future savings. I remember from the budget workshop that there was a line item in the, I think of them as the unfunded wish lists. I believe it was $50,000 for a scanning system to shift archival documents from current expensive paper storage to storage in an information system. Now, I don't think that went into the budget. I don't even think it necessarily should have done. What I think you should be spending on is some kind of experimental prototyping. Perhaps instead of getting a production number of scanners, get one scanner. Get students involved, in studying exactly how much could be saved. Get students involved in investigating the legalities involved in having students do the scanning. Please gavel me down if I'm going off into the weeds of substance here rather than
I forgot to
budget.
set my timer, Mr. Montgomery, so.
I'm
okay.
done?
Okay.
Oh, okay. I have in mind that it could be very educational for even very young students to participate in a production line activity and to study the industrial engineering issues associated with setting up and operating a production line. Currently, I think most of the students who get that kind of exposure to industrial engineering get it in part-time work at McDonald's or Burger King. So that's my say. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Any other members of the public with comments or questions about the budget only? Yes. Please come to the microphone and state your name and your address. Thank you.
Elizabeth Winslow, 211 Dodds Lane. I have a clarification. This page here on the attachment, this is balance sheet, correct? This is a statement of reserves that exist for various expenses. Is that right? Are you looking at? I'm looking at
The advertised budget?
the advertised recapitulation of balances. So this would be balance sheet, right? So I'm looking at the fluctuation of the legal reserve year over year, and it's changing by material six-figure amounts every year, but I can't find a corresponding expense on the expense side or a revenue item from undoing a legal reserve. So I'm wondering what the accounting is there. What am I missing?
Well, the main thing is it's not a legal reserve in the sense of legal bills, if you're asking that. It's not that. It's a requirement of the district's reserves in the sense of we have a 2% fund balance that we're able to save. We have level for encumbrances. So this,
Well, year over year, it's gone down $400,000. Where did the $400,000 go?
I'd have to look at the further detail to give you that, because this is all rolled up into a recapitulation of balances is a very detailed report on how it calculates out.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd have to actually pull out my work papers on that to tell you how where the numbers come from, but it's not, it didn't go anywhere. I don't know how to explain it.
Was
really.
it paid in settlements?
No, it's not legal. It's got nothing to do with legal. It's not legal bills.
Then
no.
what is the legal reserve for if it's not legal bills?
It's a category by state terminology of a legal reserve as to amount of money we have to hold for specific items. Like one aspect could be encumbrances.
So think statutory rather than legal in the
Yeah,
litigation
stat- yeah.
sense. This is a
Okay.
legal.
It's not legal.
It's a statutory reserve.
Legally required, yeah.
Reserves for specific purposes, but it's not a reserve for legal expenses. Is that
Correct. That's absolutely correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Does that answer your question, Ms. Winslow?
It does. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Okay, hearing none. May I have a motion for? I'm sorry. God, sorry, Kurt. May I have a motion for revised items D 2 through 5? And old items D 6 and 7. Pat, second? Good, Justin, thank you. Further comment? Is this a roll call vote, Mrs. Kennedy?
It's not.
Show of hands? Okay. May I see a show of hands? All in favor?
Can I ask you a question? Do I have a conflict because of insurance?
Oh, that's such a good question.
No, because we're not appointing.
No, because we're not appointing anyone. This is numbers. We're not approving contracts.
Okay. So even though we're appropriating money, you're advising me to vote yes?
Well, I'm not
Advising
advising
you
you
that
to
you
vote.
vote.
Well,
Of course, I'm advising you to vote yes,
Yes,
but
no,
I'm
but-
only advising you to vote, really.
But you're not aware of a
It's-
conflict?
No, absolutely, correct.
you.
That
Yes,
actually
absolutely.
makes sense to me, too.
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay, so can I just see a show of hands one more time? It's okay. Good to clarify. All right, unanimous. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Moving on to item F. We now move on to the regular portion of our meeting. I know that Steve does have more to say in his report beyond the budget presentation that he and Mrs. Kennedy have already ably given. Thank you, so I'll try to keep this brief. But I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge the painful and disturbing events of the past month in this district, specifically the now nationally infamous beer pong game played by some PHS students at a private party during spring break, the publicizing of that game by another PHS student, the ensuing media frenzy, the effect that that had on our entire PHS student body, and the shock that I know we all felt personally and as a community. The PHS administration and the district administrators have been working nearly nonstop since that incident came to light to address the events appropriately, and I know that I speak for the entire board when I say we are all appreciative of their work. These very upsetting incidents cast a bright spotlight on many problems that we must acknowledge exist and have long existed in our town, in our schools, in our homes, and among our children. Racial, ethnic, and religious intolerance, cultural insensitivity, underage drinking, reckless use of social media, among others. The incidents at least for me in my home, provoked hard questions, and I'm sure it did for many, and I know it did in our schools. Most importantly, questions about how meaningfully and effectively we are teaching our children at all age levels about historic and present injustices. We do educate our children about genocide and racism and bigotry, but I think what we've learned is that we don't do enough. The same goes for how well we're teaching our kids about the risks of alcohol and drug use, the harm that can be caused to others by reckless use of social media, and what it means to be a role model, what it means to be a leader, what it means to be a person of character. So now we are left in the aftermath of continuing to work together to address these issues and this incident. And we're left with questions. What can we do as a community and as a school district to clarify and strengthen our codes, both our express codes and our unspoken codes of expected conduct, good decision-making, and character for all of our students, athletes, student leaders, introverts, musicians, everybody. Fundamentally, how do we instill in our children a deep understanding that their treatment of others and their decisions in public and in private are their character? I would love to see student participation in the processes that are already underway to address these and other questions. I think we need to know, and our administrators need to know, what is important to our students. What changes would matter to them? What changes would actually make a difference in their lives at school? Fundamentally, who do they want to be in the world and to the people in their lives? I believe that involving our children and our kids, as many of them as possible, in the complicated work of coming together to develop solutions is critical to their learning and to our eventual collective success. As one community member said to me, this series of events must be seen as an opportunity for all of us to work together to make our schools a better place for every child. I have great hope that as difficult as this has been and continues to be for us, our entire staff will embrace this opportunity, work with various community stakeholders towards real and important changes that must come as a result. And with that, I turn it over to you, Mr. Cochran.
Thank you, Ms. Spalla. I too want to begin tonight with a statement about an incident that has captured the attention of the press and, most importantly, has captured, I believe, the conscience of our community. As Ms. Spalla eloquently expressed, and as I'm sure almost everyone is aware, both here and watching at home, several of our young people were recently involved in a drinking game with anti-Semitic implications. A picture was posted, a blog was written, and the story went viral. The most significant outcome, however, has not been the coverage abroad, but the difficult yet meaningful conversations here at home. Discussions about decision-making, about underage drinking, and about the use and misuse of social media, certainly about anti-Semitism and other forms of hurtful discrimination based on religion, race, culture, or sexual orientation. I am grateful to the families who have used this as an opportunity to reflect with their children. I am grateful to our teachers who've had conversations about the various issues with their students. And I am grateful to the many young people in this community who continue to consider how this incident may positively impact the decisions they will make in the future. The incident has called for thoughtful action on the part of our entire community, and our community has responded. We are working with the Jewish Center of Princeton to host an event at the high school on March 4th for Holocaust Remembrance Day. We are partnering with Corner House to offer a program on May 18th focused on underage drinking and parent-host liability. We are also in conversation with the Princeton Public Library to develop a forum on the power and potential problems associated with the use and misuse of social media. We are looking at a timely response to this situation, but also at a timeless one. We want to ensure that the issues raised by this event are ones we talk about more immediately with students, but also ones about which we deepen students' understanding in the years to come. As educators, we are looking at those points in our curriculum where we can augment students' understanding of the Holocaust and of other acts of genocide. We are considering ways to underscore students' thoughtful and ethical use of social media, and we are continuing to explore ways that we can work with parents and community partners to help students make healthy and legal choices about drugs and alcohol. As I shared in a recent message to the families at Princeton High School, we are defined not by the difficulties we encounter in our lives, but by how we face them. As we continue to face this difficulty, I know that we will do so in the spirit of all that is right in our community. We will do so with honesty and integrity, with respect for different points of view, and with compassion for all of the people affected both within and beyond our town. I hope we do so as well with a vision of what we can become as a school district and as a community, leaders in the areas of health and wellness, ethical decision-making, and respect and affirmation for all races, religions, and cultures. Thank you. I do have a statement about Park as well.
Go for it.
Okay. As many of you are aware, the Princeton Public Schools are currently wrapping up the administration of Park assessments for students in grades 3 through 11. We began at the high school and in 5th grade, I think on April 11th, and we're finishing up this week at the middle school and for 3rd grade. Despite a glitch on April 20th, during which schools throughout the state experienced a 24-hour delay because of a problem with Pearson's online platform, the second year of implementing the computer-based test has proceeded, in this district at least, with remarkable smoothness. The smoothness of implementation is due in no small measure to the tireless efforts of Angela Ciso, our Director of Guidance and our District Test Coordinator. I also wish to acknowledge Bonnie Leatt, our Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum, all of our principals, our vice principals, counselors, teachers, paraprofessionals, and particularly our technology staff for all the work they did to ensure the tests were administered appropriately and with as small a disruption to learning as possible. The administration of Park this year, like last, continues to spark debate about the potential merits and drawbacks of this new computer-based test. The Princeton Public Schools have proven to be a safe space for engaging in healthy debates on topics such as standardized tests, and we want to continue to honor that openness. At the same time, I believe we need to shift the overall conversation in education from one focusing on standardization to one focusing on innovation. The current paradigm in education throughout our country is based largely on the factory model of the 19th century. Students are viewed as products and move through a K-12 assembly line of learning. Students who need more time are taken off the assembly line. Students who need less time generally continue at the same pace as everyone else. Specialization by subject matter is seen as the most efficient way of imparting information, and students spend each day moving from science to social studies to English to math. And since standardization is essential to the factory model, tests are administered at the end of the year to ensure the quality of the product. But our students are not products. They are people. They are individuals with unique interests, abilities, and hopes. So what paradigm for learning works for them? I would argue for a paradigm based on giving students some choice in what they learn, one that allows for different levels of challenge based on different levels of readiness, one in which mistakes are welcomed as a means of helping students reflect and revise, one in which it is assumed that students learn at different rates, one that affirms the value of collaboration and of solving problems together, and one that recognizes that real-world problems don't fall into discrete content areas but require an interdisciplinary approach. Through our current work with our strategic plan and associated goals, we are striving to create an educational paradigm that includes these elements and promotes meaningful, engaging, and personalized learning. The data collected from the Park assessment may indeed over time aid us in evaluating the effectiveness of our programs and help to ensure that our educational approaches are serving every student. We will know more once we develop a multi-year pattern of test results. In the meantime, we need to be vigilant about how the Park assessments could potentially be used. Currently, the New Jersey Department of Education is proposing to use the Park assessment as a graduation requirement beginning with current high school seniors in the class of 2016. If these requirements are passed into law, New Jersey would join only 13 states that tie diplomas to standardized exit tests, down from 25 states in 2012. Moreover, New Jersey would become one of only 2 states in the nation requiring students to achieve a certain score on the PARCC assessments in order to graduate. Tonight on the agenda is a board resolution in response to this proposal, and I would urge all of us to consider it carefully. In shifting the educational paradigm to an individualized and innovative learning model, we need to resist reliance on standardized tests as the primary means of assessment and instead foster broad public dialogues about equitable assessments, policies, and instructional practices, one that offer multiple pathways for achieving not just a high school diploma, but a life of joy, purpose, and true success. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, you guys. Okay. May I have a motion for the adoption of item H1? This is the Harassment, Intimidation, and Bullying Report, which contains confidential student information and is reviewed by the board in closed session. Molly, second. Justin, thank you. All in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you. Moving on to board committee reports, everybody's favorite part of the meeting. Maddie Norman and Nick Pibble, you are up.
So
Oh wait, I'm so sorry. Nick, where are you going to college next year?
Claremont McKenna.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I got the text from your mom last night. And Maddie, I think we all know this already, but do you want to just share with everybody where you're going to college next year?
Oh, I'm going to the University of Chicago.
Yay! It's just beginning. Okay, sorry to embarrass you. I couldn't resist. Go ahead.
We miss you already.
We'll miss all of you.
We will.
Yeah, sure.
So good evening to everyone. This upcoming month will be sadly one of our final months here as board liaisons.
Our final month.
Our final
Yes.
month, yes, as student liaison to this board. So tonight, we hope to continue to discuss changes that students overwhelmingly want this board to pursue. First, though, and especially because we're here to speak on behalf of the students, we would like to address the viral event that went on over the past month.
In our effort,
Okay, you guys, you're not going to mention any names, right?
of course not.
Thank you.
Right. So, in our effort to accurately represent the student voice and not just Nick and I's opinions on the incident, we included questions about the incident in our recent survey. We took the survey last week, not immediately after the incident, so students had a chance to respond after reflecting for a few weeks. And we started by asking students descriptively about the community response to the incident. And while most teachers chose to not bring the issue into their classrooms, students of the teachers who did were grateful to have the opportunity to discuss the issue in an environment where respectful discourse could be guaranteed.
We began by asking the students what students believe would be most helpful going forward from the incident. Students ranked a suggestion as very harmful, somewhat harmful, neutral, somewhat helpful, or very helpful. A large majority of students responded that making counseling and mental health resources more public and available, especially in light of heightened social tension, would be neutral to very helpful. We asked next whether an organized school-wide discussion would be helpful or harmful, and responses were distributed in a bell curve, with neutral as the mode. Next, we asked whether students in our steps forward should include a focus on partying and drinking. The mode response was that this would be neither helpful nor harmful. We next asked whether the students should include a focus on racism and cultural sensitivity. More students thought that this would be helpful than harmful. Following that, we asked whether a focus on the risks and ethnic issues surrounding ethical issues surrounding social media use would be helpful or harmful. A majority of students believe that this would, again, be helpful to our current situation. Some students noted in open-ended parts of the survey that an organized school-wide discussion might only have minor effects on increasing total dialogue because students have been having conversations since the event happened. While the students indicated some disagreement among students on the next steps for our community to take, there was a clear consensus among students that the trivialization of the Holocaust is unacceptable, whether due to malice or ignorance. Going off of that, we would like to say that the student council did meet with the administration on multiple occasions to discuss the steps and what the feedback from the students were, we noticed that the administration took a very, as we saw, or well, Maddie,
I was out of town.
but the rest of the student council saw that the administration handled this in our eyes in a appropriate manner, that when we suggested that we have a Holocaust Remembrance Assembly, we see this coming into action, that when we put a focus on social media and partying and drinking and that culture, we see that we are getting those classes, we're having those open dialogues so that students understand that when they voice their opinion to the student council and we convey that to the administration, that the administration is carrying that out. And that idea is what is most important to the students at hand now.
So because this upcoming month is also the last month of our term, we would like to urge the board to create a more concrete vision for changes implemented in future years, including next year. And the discussion of the incredible pressure that students are under to achieve has already brought us forward. Yet it is even more crucial that we act based on any understanding we've gained throughout this process of the pervasive nature of this problem and how profoundly it interacts with our ability to act in accordance with our district's mission, as we were talking about last month. Moreover, we hope that changes for next year will demonstrate that the model of student advocacy can sufficiently catalyze initiatives to tangibly improve students' lives. We'd really like to see changes that are going to be implemented next year, especially as we near the end of our term. We recognize that it's difficult to make major scheduling changes because a lot of the scheduling has already happened with students and their guidance counselors. But we hope that out of this process will come experiments that we can implement as soon as next year.
And Maddie and I would like to just reinforce the idea that these experimental programs do not need to be implemented initially in full force, that we can take the steps at a slower increment. While we may disagree on the optimal solution, preserving the status quo for much longer is no longer a viable option. Thus, we would like to ask the board for updates on the implementation of an option 2 PE exception model, something that was lauded at the last meeting by student speakers and board members alike for its positive potential.
Not right now, at the end, we can discuss. And the point is that we just like to know how it's going. But also, we'd like to see at least one experiment with a later start to the school day in the upcoming year. It doesn't need to be something that we fiat now to affect all of next year every single day. But we should also remember to heed the warning of the Centers for Disease Control and the reports on this issue and avoid dismissing this issue of public health, both mental and physical, for our students as a matter of lazy teenagers. We often hear appeals to the CVC or the Colonial Valley Conference Athletic League, their official game times, as a reason the school day should remain as is. But as a district, we should never let the CVC trump a report from the CDC. We should be actively researching everything we can do to circumvent consequences that we deem unacceptable and truly treating students' mental and physical health as a priority.
Speaking of experiments, for those who are unfamiliar, the modified schedule for the week of park testing at the high school generally involved park testing for several hours in the morning, followed by a slate of classes that was either a student's morning classes or their afternoon classes. This meant that across the board, students experienced a simple form of block scheduling, where classes alternated between days. It has also meant that students who were not taking the park, including seniors who were initially exempt and underclassmen who opted out, had class start later in the morning. We asked students what they thought of the modified park schedule. Here are some notable responses.
Loved the late start. Felt well rested for the first time all year.
Park week was awesome because even though we still had homework, it was more manageable because I was well rested.
Better than heaven. If the school year could be like that, I think I'd learn a lot more, struggle less, and have a better attitude towards school during the day.
I loved it, 6 exclamation points. I felt great going to school every day and was able to be more focused in class.
Same thoughts. I was much more able to concentrate in my classes after getting so much sleep the night before. I also liked the block schedule because I would have more time to work on each subject and there are only a couple periods each day and the classes alternate.
That was incredible. It really was an incredibly stress-free week, probably the first since spring break. It helped me catch up on the sleep that I'd been missing out, which was a lot. It was a blast. I slept more than I have in the past 6 months.
I loved the 10:30 days. I woke up and had some time before school to go on a run, eat a healthy breakfast for once, do some extra studying, and be productive. I would be extremely happy with the school day starting at that time regularly. Not what we're, I mean, yes, but we probably would be able to find a compromise. And the continuation of this response says, I was so much more alert and well rested. It was very nice, refreshing break from my usual schedule.
These responses are especially significant because the mode response to how stressed are you on average at this time of year was a 7 out of 10. Park Week shows that an extreme yet short-term schedule change was successful and worthwhile in alleviating stress. We asked students if they would support an initiative to take temporary park-like weeks, including a late start in half the classes but without the park. multiple times per year. 97.6% of respondents answered yes.
So we and the students who speak to us each week about the importance of Option 2 PE exemptions and a later start are incredibly excited to see which improvements will be enacted for next year. Moreover, we hope the board and community will turn our district's collective embrace of progress into action to tackle this problem. Thank you.
Great job, you guys. Okay, Fern is not here tonight, so in her stead, Molly will be giving the facilities report.
I turned on the microphone.
Good job.
The Facilities Committee met on April 18th. We were updated on the installation of the fan in the new gym at PHS. We then discussed the results of the water tests that were done as a precautionary measure over spring break. The results were overall very good. There were 2 slightly elevated results at Johnson Park Elementary. One was for traces of copper in an outside water fountain, and one was for a trace of lead in the sink and the staff lounge. Immediate remedial measures were taken. A statement was sent home to family, staff, and is on our website. And I believe there was a meeting with the staff at Johnson Park as well. Other than that, it was a pretty short meeting. We were updated on all the projects that were talked about in the budget presentation, including brick repointing at Princeton High School, windows at Riverside, the Valley Road roof, the generator at JW, and the life skills room at the high school, in addition to the family literacy space on the second floor here. The next meeting of facilities will be May 16th.
Thank you. Finance? Mr. Sullivan?
Thank you. Got my button. So, Finance Committee met tonight at 6 p.m. And most of our meeting, obviously, was about the budget that you saw tonight. No need to speak more about that after that great presentation. But we did spend a few minutes on a couple of items. One was a desire to look for alternative sources of revenue in the years ahead, and we'll be taking some initial actions to create a plan to do that, and you'll probably be hearing more about that in meetings in the future. The other thing we talked about briefly at the end was we've been through another budget process. It turned out fairly well after what we were afraid was a shaky start, but once again, turned out well. We want, as Daphne alluded to earlier, want to work on ways to get more transparency into the budgeting process and have more strategic planning sort of baked into that process so that we're not scrambling at the end. We are mindful that we have, for one thing, labor negotiations coming up again, not too long in the future, and we need to have a longer-term vision of where we're going, and not only where we make investments, but where we disinvest in things that we no longer want to do anymore. So thinking about that in a more strategic way is something that we'd like to start now so that we're not caught at the end of the next process wishing we'd done some of that planning ahead of time. So that's something that we'll be working on again in meetings ahead. We adjourned at 7 o'clock. The next meeting is on May 24th at 6 o'clock here at Valley Road.
Thank you. Personnel, Ms. Krein.
The Personnel Committee did not meet in April, but we are meeting on Monday for our marathon tenure and reappointment review.
Good luck. Student Achievement, Mr. Sullivan.
Thanks. A Student Achievement Committee met on April 25th here in Valley Road at 12:30, and we approved several overnight trips. that are on the agenda at item L9. We also had two brief overview from the Director of Student Services, and we will probably ask Mickey Crisafulli to come back and talk to us some more. One thing that we discussed a bit was the nexus between special education and general education, and how not only how can we make sure that everyone's served with special education, but making sure that our general education expectations and sort of standards are such that people can succeed and then not have to go to special education in the first place. So we'll be exploring that in a little more detail next time that she comes to visit with us. And one great example of that was the next thing that we had was Deneen Gruchas from Community Park came to give an update on the dual language immersion program that's happening there. It's an extremely successful, extremely popular program. She came armed with videos, and it was just wonderful to see kindergartners and first graders speaking fluent Spanish after a year of the program. It's just remarkable to see that kind of improvement. And one thing that she noted was that among many positive things that have come out of this initiative, referrals, special education referrals have gone down, partly because we've not just worried about the outcome, but we sort of changed the questions we asked. We changed the expectations, not in a negative way, in a very positive way. So, and we spent a little time talking, Maddie and Nick, about what that program means in the sense of how to achieve change in this district. I mean, there's a very radical, new, innovative program that started mainly within that building and came up to us, and the people at CP were basically allowed to do what they needed to do to get that done. It was wonderful to see. And so the question is, how can we do that more? How can we have more innovation from the teachers of this district and the administrators of this district, not coming from the top down, but coming from the bottom up? We also had a brief update on the strategic plan, which obviously a lot of touches on a lot of those things that we discussed. So it was another interesting and informative meeting. The next meeting is on May 13th at 12:30 p.m. here at Valley Road.
Thank you. Policy Committee, Mr. Hagedorn.
Thank you. The Policy Committee met on Thursday, March 24th at 8:45 a.m. The committee discussed Policy 1230.1 on the disclosure of personnel decisions. It's on the addendum, the yellow one on K2. The committee also continued work. We're going to have a first reading of this policy on tonight's agenda. The committee also continued work on a draft of the dyslexia screening policy. We expect to have a first reading of that policy at the May board meeting. Tonight's agenda in item K1 also has second readings of policy 3221, 3222, 3223, and 3224, which are all on the evaluation of teaching staff members and administrators, and policy 5330 on the administration of medicine. Our next meeting will be at 8:45 on Thursday, May 12th here at Valley Road, and the meeting is open to the public.
Thank you. We come now to our first of two public comment opportunities. This first public forum is for any members of the public who would like to come up and say anything at all about agenda items only. So anything that is on the agenda, items K through N. If you have a comment about that, you may speak now. Go ahead, Mr. Montgomery. Should I set my timer, Mr. Montgomery?
Yes, please.
Okay. Okay.
Rod Montgomery from William Patterson Court. I just want to take another whack at the annual performance review. Thank Superintendent Cochran for his very thoughtful response to my rant last month, but particularly his saying that the DAC, I don't remember how that expands, has a strong focus on meaningful conversation about kids and instruction rather than on checking boxes and giving ratings. It's not just administrators rating teachers that I find objectionable. It is also the board rating administrators. there is a fundamental role conflict between giving ratings and coaching improvement. It applies to teachers with respect to students, and it applies to grades for students as well as ratings for teachers and administrators. These ratings are corrosive and poisonous. This is a deadly disease like gangrene or leprosy. It's not a cold that you get over. The Leander Public Schools in Texas negotiated with Texas, which has an even more ferocious rating regime than New Jersey's, for a waiver that let them decouple retention decisions from leadership for purposes of improvement. I don't know whether you can negotiate with the state of New Jersey for such a waiver. I understand that the literacy team seems to be doing leadership for improvement decoupled from rating for reward or punishment, and I hope that you will extend that pattern to areas of instruction other than literacy. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Anybody else with comments about agenda items only? Anything on the agenda items K through N? Okay, moving on. Personnel. May I have a motion for personnel items L1 and 2? Molly, second. Tom, thank you. I'm sorry. Oh, I skipped K. Shoot. Let's do L anyway since the motion is on the table. Molly and Tom, roll call vote. Mrs. Kennedy. Sorry, my bad.
Andrea Spalla,
Yes.
Patrick Sullivan,
Yes.
Betsy Calber Baglio,
Yes.
Molly Crime,
Yes.
Justin Duran,
Yes.
Tom Hagendorn,
Yes.
Daphne Kendall,
Yes.
Evelyn Spahn,
Yes.
Connie Witter.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, going back to item K, I note, as Mr. Hagedorn noted in his policy committee report, that there is, for first reading on the agenda, on the addendum on yellow paper, policy 1230.1. May I have a motion?
That's just a,
Just
there's no
for
vote
first
on that,
reading,
just
right,
first
no,
reading.
I get it.
Okay.
May I have a motion
Thank you.
for the
Sorry.
adoption on second reading of the policies listed under item K1? Tom? Betsy? Discussion?
I just had a question on 1230.1.
Yep.
Something that we were discussing before in a bit in finance. There's a couple of things. One is in the third paragraph where it says the superintendent or his staff will inform the board or its personnel committee about a position. We thought that there's a link with finance there in that we want to know that there's budget for such a position and have the ability to have some input there. So it's sort of, this seems like it's just saying that we're going to be told and that's it, and that's the end of it. So maybe we should look at that language a little bit and think about how that impacts the budget.
All right.
I can have that discussion with my team.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Come back to you with some.
Okay, and then
Yes.
one
Well,
other.
Well, that's why we do first reading. That's
Right,
why,
and then
yeah,
one
it's on
related
the table.
point on that, maybe it belongs in here and maybe it doesn't, but we, when we were talking about transparency and some of the other issues on finance, again, the question came up about the transparency of appointments for example, for EPS and other things, and we didn't, let's say it's an open question whether it belongs in here or somewhere else, but decisions, a disclosure of personnel decisions, it seems that there, at least from many people on the board's perspective, still not enough transparency into how those decisions are made. So query, does it belong in here or is it a discussion for another time? But it's an issue that if we're talking about personnel decisions, those count. So
They do add up.
yes, they do add up. And it also, yes, there are a whole host of issues around it.
Okay.
Great.
Good for the policy committee members here to hear that. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Okay. All in favor of the adoption of the policies on second reading in item K1? Unanimous? Thank you. Okay. May I have a motion for items M1 through 10? 1 through 11, which includes the items on the regular agenda and on the addendum on yellow paper. Justin, thank you. Second, anyone? Connie, thank you. Okay, so items M1 through 11, any discussion? Questions?
Excited to see Odyssey of the Mind World Finals. That's a very exciting field trip to approve. Excited that our students are going to Iowa.
Anything else? All in favor of items M1 through 11? Okay, unanimous, thank you. Business items. May I have a motion for item N1, a resolution on the state's proposed graduation requirements? Pat, second. Justin, thank you. What? We have two N's.
Oh.
All right. No, it's okay. It's okay. So you know what? Let's do
The first N is
school business.
Yeah.
Let's do all the items. May I have a motion for all the items under school business, item N1 through 15, pages 9 through 13 on the white agenda.
Yep.
Anyone? Pat? Second. Justin? Thank you. Discussion. All right, all in favor? Now, we are on old business, new business, which is marked N. Let's just call it O, shall we?
Sure.
May I have a motion on new item O, old business, new business, a resolution on the state's proposed graduation requirements? Justin, thank you. Second, Molly, thank you. Any discussion?
Sorry, I'd like clarification about, what this is addressing, because is this about the new standards for the current students who are seniors, or is this talking about the proposals for students who are, say, in 7th and 8th grades going forward?
No, this is only with respect to the proposal by the State Department of Education to make last year's administration of Park a graduation requirement this year for this year's current seniors, having not given adequate and timely notice last year to those students, that it would be deemed a graduation requirement now.
Okay, that's very helpful. I had a question about 2B, because I have to admit, I did not know about the Governor's College and Career Ready Task Force. This is the one from 2012?
Correct.
So I think it's better not to have any one test serve as a minimum passing score as a graduation requirement. I'm in favor of that. But I was reading through the Governor's College and Career Ready Task Force, and it seems like their main recommendation is to institute end-of-course assessments administered by the Park throughout the entire high school curriculum.
With a multi-year transition
Right.
process, phasing it in with adequate notice.
Right, and I'm glad to see that there are multiple exams, but I have to say I shudder at the idea that the Park testing is going to be attached to every course or many courses throughout the high school.
Right. Well, this resolution does not, I agree with you, that would be insane. That's just my personal opinion, but this resolution does not urge or imply the adoption of that recommendation. It simply cites as a basis for the concerns about using these new graduation requirements, the College and Career Ready Task Force's own findings. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, I just have to say I read 2B differently because their recommendation for their new assessment system is the end of course park, and they use the word park assessments. So reading through their task force, it seems to me we are endorsing that. And
I see.
I'm troubled
I see
by
your
that.
point. Okay, I see your point. See,
Yeah.
When I wrote this, I thought of the multi-year, I was focusing on the multi-year transition part and the no minimum passing score part, but I totally see your point, Tom.
Yeah.
So what do you want to do?
Do we have
I'm open to suggestions.
Do we have any children any students that will be affected?
Yes.
We do. How many?
That is not information that I've been told we are at liberty to share because it's confidential to those students.
Do we have time to help them graduate?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. So,
I guess when you say what my concern would be is I'm perfectly happy to support a resolution that helps students graduate because I think we shouldn't impose last-minute requirements. I hesitate to endorse anything that might lead to further
more
testing
yeah.
in high schools.
And be misconstrued as
Correct.
such. Got it. So, does anybody else have any questions or concerns or share Tom's concerns about the possible ambiguity of this paragraph?
So I was just gonna, so the fact that this is not going to materially affect our students because they will still be able to graduate, and given the ambiguity of the resolution, I would propose just reading it next month.
Okay. Well,
If that's-
time is,
if-
actually, time is of the essence.
It is.
Yeah, the State Board of Education is meeting next on May 4th. And it's likely that they will vote. I mean, all prognosticators on these things say it's likely they're going to vote to approve these regulations, then they'll be in full force and effect at that point. So, the purposes of these resolutions are non-binding. Nobody has to listen to them. This is just us saying, this is affecting us. We have with our students. We recognize this is a statewide issue, but it affects Princeton too. We see problems, with respect to this resolution, we see problems with the lack of adequate notice, the failings of due process, the impact on students, not just in Princeton, but statewide. The questions about the legality of this proposed graduation requirement to this year's seniors don't affect a high number of Princeton students, but the legality affects all of us equally, I think, statewide. It does affect thousands, maybe tens of thousands of students, current seniors statewide. So every time 8 school boards so far in the state have passed this kind of resolution, every time a resolution is passed by a school board somewhere, it gets press coverage and it gets attention, and more parents learn about this, and more people who care about public schools and about students learn about this, and it builds momentum, and it makes otherwise unaccountable governor-appointed State Board of Education members maybe listen to the people that they are supposed to serve. So, I mean, I feel like this, even though it's non-binding, and even though it doesn't feel like time should be of the essence, I think it is.
So here's a suggestion, would this help, Tom, if you just struck after, sorry? Would it help if you just struck in B, for after the word implement, strike out everything until anew, and then end after graduation requirements? So it would read, urges the NJDOE to implement a new assessment system that does not establish a minimum passing score as a graduation requirement, period.
That's fine.
Stephanie, do we need a separate motion that reflects that edit?
You can just edit it.
Okay. Is everyone
you.
else okay with that, or understands that change?
I understand it. It seems crazy that the NJDOE would even attempt to pass this sort of requirement based on the lack of participation of students in Park across the state. And I want to say, for lack of a better word, the lack of success in terms of that the park has really demonstrated. It's a new test. It's untested. I mean, if you look at what the SAT College Board did in terms of their new test and changing things, it's a process. And to implement this as quickly as they have, and now want to pass this as a graduation requirement, seems to me that it's premature.
It also seems like an ex post facto law.
Totally.
The action's already occurred, and now they're passing a law that says you have implications based on something that already happened. So it seems really unfair, if not unconstitutional, to
Right.
even try to do something like this.
Right. Fern went with me to, the legislature has a joint committee on public schools, and Fern went with me to their last hearing a couple months ago. And someone from the Education Law Center gave a presentation on this matter and the proposed regulations and the impact it would have on current seniors across the state. And Fern laughed and she said, it's just like they're just moving the goalposts on these kids in the middle of the game, or at the end of the game, really. I mean, it's just so unfair. Anyway, Fern's not here to speak for herself, but that's what she told me. Any other comments? Questions? Are we ready to vote? All in favor of passing resolution on the state's proposed graduation requirements with the edits proposed by Pat? All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you very much. And now we move to our final public comment opportunity. Thank you. This is an opportunity for any member of the public to come to the microphone and tell us what's on your mind about anything. What?
Can I go first? Is that all right? Sorry, Bob,
Wait,
come.
Daphne,
Yeah.
are you speaking for yourself?
Yes.
Then you should go to the microphone and just make it clear that you're speaking for yourself and not as an acting board member sitting on the dais in a meeting.
As an acting board member.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. So I just wanted to address the beer pong, the Nazi beer pong incident. And I just wanted to say the very fact that the content of the beer pong occurred showed that we as a community are not doing an adequate job educating our children about the Holocaust. However, it is not just the school's responsibility, it is the responsibility of the community and ultimately the parents. As Andrea said previously, a spotlight has been shined on how the situation is being addressed. I want your assurances that a spotlight will also be shined on how we as a community will address the problems. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to respond to that? Or? No. Okay. Okay. Dr. Carell.
Hi, Bob Carell, teacher at Princeton High School. So after the last meeting when Mrs. Spahn and I went back and forth a couple times, she sent me a proposal which I thought had some serious merit to it that we should consider in light of the students' concerns. And it's very vague right now, okay? But if you took and gave a weight to each course that the kid took, and each additional activity and each additional club, and give a certain weight to a varsity sport and give a certain weight to PHS studio band because of all the extra hours they have to put in, and give an AP course a certain weighting, and then say, this is what we think is the total weight you should put on your shoulders. Mm-hmm. And this is the number for a freshman, and this is the number for a senior, and whatever your number is, if you don't meet the maximum as a freshman, that's fine. But you can't go from half the maximum as a freshman to the maximum as a sophomore because we think that's too big of a jump. So I just think it was an inspired idea, and I thought the whole board should hear about it, and it's something to think about. Thank you.
I love that idea.
Dr. Carell, thank you very much. That idea actually has been talked about by the administration and has been implemented in some schools, not quite to the breadth that you just described it, to include the extracurricular activities, but with an outline by course of the amount of homework for each course, so that when students sign up, they can total up for their schedule what their day or week might look like and can be counseled accordingly. But I like the idea of including some of those extracurriculars as well.
And the reason I think the extracurriculars are important is I watch, studio band, just for example.
Mm-hmm.
some of the trips they go on, when do they get the work done? They have practice every Wednesday night. A varsity athlete, my son plays varsity lacrosse. He had a game last night. He had a game this afternoon. He's got a game Thursday night. I mean, it's definitely a load. And in Princeton, we seem to want to add more to the load than I see in some other districts. I just think, as I said when we first started this discussion at the beginning of the year, when I moved across the country and the rental company rented me a truck, they put a governor on the speed so that when I was coming out of the Rocky Mountains, I couldn't hit 100 miles an hour because they knew I would die. Okay? So we, as adults, I think, need to put some governors on the system.
Well said. Thank you.
But I think my point was more not for us to govern, but I think my point was more not for us to govern, but more for the students to have an awareness of what their IQ was, what their intensity quotient was. And so that's kind of where I was going with that. But yes, absolutely.
Something along those lines. I like I said, right now, as far as I'm concerned, it's
How
very
far,
vague.
how deep are you in?
I mean, when I've got
Just
a
the
kid
awareness.
in my class who's taking 7 APs as a sophomore, I kind of worry.
What?
Yes. Okay?
Thank you, Dr. Carell, as always. Anybody else?
So I get three swings this evening.
Yeah.
Rod Montgomery from William Patterson Court, taxpayer. Mostly applause, maybe a little zinger at the end. I was very impressed by the Student Achievement Committee, not only by the presentations, but also by the insightful and thoughtful questions of the board members, and I want to applaud that. So,
Well, thank you.
more applause for the always excellent This Week in Education program from Assistant Superintendent Goldstein, whose name I remembered this evening. I saw the first half of the interview with President Spala. I see that the second half has been made available, but I haven't had a chance to view it yet. I expect to find that also very, very useful. Some applause for Superintendent Cochran's blog post of 4/26/2016 about standardized tests shifting the paradigm. He presented some of that this evening, but there's more, which is also valuable, and I commend it to your attention. He recommended Peter Sengi's vision for shifting from industrial factory to a personalized learning model in education. I had been worried that Superintendent Cochran and the board under his influence have been drinking too much strategic planning Kool-Aid. Personalized learning is the right direction to go, even if intoxicated with strategic planning, you stagger a bit while moving that way. So, good direction. But please ask yourselves, I'm not asking for an answer right now. Please ask yourselves, if your focus is to be on learning and the learners, why are there no students on the strategic planning innovation action team? I falsely accused, not intentionally, the strategic planning process of having no students, and I had to apologize for that incorrect accusation. But I did look this evening at the innovation action team and found no students there. Finally, I suggest that you might even want to do a 5 whys analysis of the question I invited you to ask. to look for the root cause rather than just the immediate cause. Again, mostly applause. Thank you for your attention, and thank you for your efforts on behalf of Princeton students.
Thank you, Mr. Montgomery. Anybody else? Oh, good, a student. Hi, please state your name.
My name is Christian Martin. I live at 225 Hun Road. I'm not a taxpayer. That's not surprising. Please, not yet. Please excuse my informality. I did not plan on speaking tonight. I wanted to address something my school board liaisons, Nick and Maddie, brought up, and that was the idea of a later start. And I hadn't really thought about it, kind of in comparison to what we saw with the students who opted out of the park test. Now, because of personal ethical reasons, I did not opt out, but the friends I saw who did, I can honestly say there was a noticeable difference. And I pride myself on always working to get, that solid 8 hours of sleep. I find I need it. But I have no doubt many of you would be very surprised by the tiny amount of sleep I know many people many kids in my grade get. And this, while of course there are those students who are staying up till 2 a.m. watching Netflix, there are also ones who, as Dr. Carell mentioned, are taking 7 APs, and because of this, have just hours upon hours upon hours of homework. So coupled with pressure to get into college, this sleep deprivation, and then the expectations to still meet these requirements of, I got to get that 5 on the AP, I have to get a good score on my SATs, is insurmountable. And I do think starting later, there of course will be a few students who just shift their schedules back and just sleep in later, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I can cite from personal experience, I have a teacher who has what she calls a Cinderella policy, in which we can email her an assignment up to midnight that night. Now, that might sound like a great thing because you have all day to turn it in, but just that idea that this teacher thinks, and she's not, I think, wrong to think this, but that she knows there are going to be students up till 11:59 at night doing homework, who then 6 hours later need to wake up to catch a bus and still might not even have time for breakfast, that just confounds me. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, your name was Chris?
Christian.
Christian. Thank you very much. Usually I don't allow board members to engage in a Q&A with members of the public because I feel it could intimidate members of the public from speaking. But I know that when our board members hear from students, we are so eager to be able to engage in a little bit of dialogue. Would you mind if I allowed board members to ask you questions?
I'd be honored if you
Okay. Does anybody have any questions for Christian? We did a great job. Thank you very much.
You did indeed, Mr. Martin. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Any other members of the public wishing to make a comment? Okay, seeing none, we have a motion to what? Oh, yes, Stephanie would like me to mention this past month, a former board member, former board president, passed away. He served on the board in Princeton for 9 years. Unfortunately, Molly and I didn't overlap with him. His name is Alan Hedgedis. He was a pillar of the community for many years. Stephanie, I think, wanted to say a couple things about him because she worked very closely with him. Just briefly.
I just really wanted to recognize the fact that Alan did serve on the board for 9 years. He was the chair of the finance committee. He was also board president and vice president. It was very sad, personally for me, very sad to hear of his passing. It was a surprise. He was always, he was a very tall man and always was healthy, appeared healthy. He was just a great guy. So it was really sad for me to hear that he was gone, but he was a great board member, and I personally had a great relationship with him, so I was sad to hear that.
Yeah.
And those of us that knew him and worked with him, Gary and Lou, and Bonnie, she's here too. We worked with him, and he was a great guy. At least I think we all believe that.
Thank you. Okay, may I have a motion to adjourn? Oh, I'm so sorry, Lou.
Just kudos. Kudos to our 5 retirees who are on the agenda tonight.
Oh, right.
And thanking them for their 109 years of collective service. Betty Ann Burbick from Riverside, grade 3 teacher. Eileen Hicks, ESL teacher. Nina Lovato at JW, a parent education and community outreach coordinator. Kathy Murtor, our basic skills teacher at CP, and Maureen Murray, secretary at Riverside. We thank you all for your years of service, what you've done. And as Kathy put it, when I was talking with her, she said something very interesting, and I thought I might just want to share it with you. She said that children must learn to take responsibility for their own learning and come to love the learning process. There will not always be someone to teach them once they mature, but there will always remain the need to continue learning. And so I want to thank, on behalf of the board, I want to thank them all for their contributions to students, to staff, to parents, and the Princeton community for their many years of service.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I forgot about that. Sorry, I was so discombobulated by the weird agenda tonight. Anyway, now, I'm not forgetting anything. Motion to adjourn. Anybody? Molly? Second, Daphne. Thank you. All in favor? Thanks.